Alright guys, welcome back to another YouTube video. Thank you for all the support. It seems like this kind of videos, it's doing well as compared to my previous videos where I do up a lot of scripts and stuff like that. But yesterday's video was doing above average. So yeah, thank you so much for the support. So if you have any kind of questions regarding productivity, marketing, SEO, and just ways to get started online, please join the Facebook group I've created. It's called Optimize, and I'll leave the link in the description below. You can join, ask any questions you have, and I'll try my best to help you out. And if I don't have the answers to your question, I will try my best to point you in the right direction. So today's video, I want to show you one of the methods that I use to help you plan out your day. So I think when we are just starting out, especially when you're just starting out, there's a lot of things that you have to do, right? Especially as a beginner, there are a lot of things that you will have to do. And I think having a framework or having a system to kind of guide you on what you should be doing on a daily basis, that is very important. And today I'm going to share that with you. It's essentially a day planning where I'll show you how to plan out your day. This step is one step out of 5 from my upcoming course, which is called the 5-step productivity system, where I teach you how to plan out your entire week, how to have fun with your work, how to plan out your day, how to optimize your schedule so that you are getting the most done with the least amount of hours. So if you're interested, it's coming out in probably like 7-8 days. I'll leave the link in the description down below as well. But today I just want to share with you this, how to plan your day, and I call this the priority time blocking. So I'm going to show you behind the screen here, but you probably have heard of time blocking already. And I've seen a lot of videos out there that talks about time blocking, but in a sense, I don't think a productivity system will work not for everybody because there's a lot of variables inside. Like for example, if I'm a morning person, the time where I am going to be most efficient will be in the morning, right? And if you were to use my productivity system or my system, it's not going to work for you if you're a night owl, right? So the system that I've created, the 5SPS, is meant for you to find your own system that works for you, right? So it's kind of like I'm not giving you the fish, I am giving you the rod. I'm teaching you how to fish. So today's video will just be about, showing you how to plan your day. And regardless of whether you're a night owl, you are, I don't know, whether you are a very early morning person or you're just a regular person waking up at 8 o'clock, right? So I'm going to jump to my screen here. Okay, so I'm going to use this dummy account, additional email account that I have. But what you need is you will need to have some kind of like calendar. And if you're not working with a calendar, I would highly recommend you to use a calendar. So for me, I use Google Calendar because it syncs up with a lot of my devices. So I'm going to show you how to plan out your day most efficiently so that you can get the most amount of work done and move the needle the most, right? Because you don't want to be investing in a lot of hours and then, just working long hours, because I don't think that's a smart way to do it. So when it comes to planning out your day, so I'm going to just take this day as an example. Right now it's 11:41 a.m. on a Friday. So this depends on what time you wake up, whether are you a morning person, a night person, or an early morning person, right? So for me, I wake up very early in the morning, and you want to firstly determine when are the hours that you function the best, like you are the most zoning, you can stay focused the most, because that's where you want to pay special attention, right? That time zone, you're not going to be very focused like 24 hours of the day. There will be a time slot where you are the most focused. So you want to pay attention to that. So for me, it's early in the morning. I'm not a night person, I'm a morning person. So that's the first thing that you need to take note on, right? The second thing now you have to do is you then have to plan out your day in accordance to the most important thing first, right? So usually what I do, right, there will be 2 groups of tasks that you will do. And I categorize them as 2 groups because it's easier to decide which tasks you should be doing first and which tasks you should be spending most of your time on. So there are essentially 2 groups only. The first one, it's grow, right? Any task that you do that it's either growing something, like growing yourself, growing the business, like it belongs to a category of group. And then there's another group which is called maintenance, where you're just, the task that you do, it's maintaining whatever that you're doing, right? Whether if it's, let's say, for example, sending an invoice, whether if it's client communication, all these belongs to maintenance. Now, depending on what you're offering and what kind of business you are in, what you're doing, the different tasks, like for example, if client communication to me could be maintenance, but it could be growth for you because you are trying to grow the relationship, right? There's no like set rule here. So you decide whether the task falls under growth for you or maintenance for you. But essentially, they only fall under this. So what you want to do, right, it's once you know when you are the most focused, when is the optimal zone for you, and you know the categories, whether if it's growth or maintenance, then you can go ahead and start planning your day. And what you want to do is you want to spend the most efficient time of your day, the most focused time of your day, to be doing growth-oriented tasks, right? Focusing on growth-oriented tasks first. So all your maintenance tasks, whether if it's admin work, paperwork, work that belongs to the maintenance category, you push it towards the timings where you are not focused, where you are not the most optimal in a sense. So I'm going to show you my example, right? So for me, again, I'm a morning person. So usually I wake up around 6 to 7. So I'm just going to put 6 a.m. I used to wake up at 5 o'clock, but right now I change it to 6 a.m. So in the morning, what I want to do is I want to be doing growth-oriented tasks, right? And typically, what I do is I schedule for 3 hours. Okay. Now, I schedule for 3 hours doesn't mean that I will be sitting down and then doing the work for 3 hours, because if there are times when if you really sit down and do your work, right? I'm not sure about you guys, but sometimes I'm able to do 3 hours of work when I'm in the flow, right? I can sit down and do 3 hours, sometimes more than 3 hours, and I lose track of time. But that's not always the case. There are days where I do 1 hour of work or 1.5 hours of work, and I find it very difficult to focus. And if I were to sit down and go through, like I have to lock in these 3 hours, it becomes very tiring because now I'm just sitting down for the sake of sitting down. I'm not enjoying whatever I'm doing. So usually on days like that, then I take a break. Now, buffering in this 6 to 9 a.m., right? It doesn't mean that you will need to sit down and then do your work from 6 to 9 a.m. It just means that this is a buffer that you're creating. Okay, so what do I mean? If you do your work from 6 to 9 and you find yourself being able to sit down and do your work from 6 to 9, that's great, right? Because you're in the zone, you lose track of time. But whenever you cannot focus anymore, right? Let's say, for example, you work until, let's say, 1.5 hours, right? Okay, I'm just going to do an example here, 1.5 hours, grow. Okay, and let's say you do 1.5 hours of work and you find yourself being distracted, like you cannot focus already. And the more you focus, the more distracted you are. Some days are like that, right? I don't believe anybody can just sit down and then do work for like, at least not for me, right? Where they just get lost in work every single day, right? I'm not talking about like just one day, but every single day. There'll be days where you just wake up on the wrong side of the bed and stuff like that, right? But in days like that, what you want to do, right, it's you plan for the buffer of 3 hours, but you allow yourself to take a short break if you need it. So for example, let's say I work for 1.5 hours and I find myself being very distracted and it's very hard for me to focus really. What I do is I then schedule a quick break here. Okay, and with Google Calendar, the reason why I like Google Calendar as well is because it's very easy, like you can duplicate this, okay? And then you can just maybe schedule like, I don't recommend taking long breaks in between your deep work session, right? The times where you're spending the most, where you're the most focused. I don't recommend you take like longer than 30 minutes break, right? But what you can do with this schedule is you can schedule a break in between, right? So instead of working three hours straight, I can schedule 6 to 7:30 when I'm working, and then 7:30 to 8 o'clock, I'm taking a quick break, and then 8 to 9, I'm going back to focus on the work again, right? And this gives you the flexibility of I don't have to sit down and then force myself to go through it if I'm like getting distracted, if let's say for some reason I am not focused during this 3 hours, right? So you can play around with this, but you want to buffer in 3 hours, right? So for me, I buffer in 3 hours. You can do 2 hours, you can do 1 hour, but depending on how long you plan to work, the amount of hours you should be spending on your growth-oriented tasks should be the majority of the time you spend working, okay? So for example, I'm going to take a very quick typical example here. So if you work a 9 to 5, right, like your typical schedule will be 9 to, let's say, 5 o'clock, okay? Let's say this is the timing that you are working, right? You want to spend majority of the hours when you're working on the most important task, which is belonging to any growth-oriented task. This task belongs to growth because whatever you're doing, you're growing, right? Whether that can be creating, that can be building something, or anything that to you is considered growth. You want to spend majority of your time from 8 to 5 p.m. That's like 5, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So that's 9 hours, right? So out of the 9 hours, you want to spend majority of the portion here on the growth-oriented task, right? So for example, for me, what I do is I usually spend like 3 hours on growth-oriented tasks because that's the most important thing for me. Okay, so you can plan in the buffer here, but that doesn't mean that you need to sit down again and work through these 3 hours. You can schedule quick breaks, and later on I'll share with you what you should be doing with your breaks, because break times are very important as well, especially when you're a freelancer, especially if you are, let's say, working from home. Even if you're not working from home, but you're dealing with a laptop, a desktop, a computer setup, this is really going to be helpful, because breaks is one of the things that either make or break your schedule. So once you have that, again, you can schedule like 15 minutes break if you want to, right? But you don't want to take too long for break, especially when it's in your growth-oriented timings. So I'm going to delete this, but this is just to show you like an example, okay? So all your growth-oriented tasks, you'll do it in the most optimal timings of your day. And then what you can do is you can either, depending on how long you work, okay? Usually, depending on what projects I'm handling, right? Sometimes I work, it only in the mornings, right? And that's the beauty of making sure that the work you're doing, it's spent on the most important tasks first, because you can choose you can choose how long you want to work, right? So some days I work only in the morning, some days I work later, depending on whether I have projects coming up, whether if something happens where I need to like solve certain problems and stuff like that, right? But what you want to do is after you're growth oriented, then you can schedule in like, let's say, your maintenance. And this can be, again, this can be like 2 hours, 3 hours, 1.5 hours. So for example, this is 2 hours. Okay, I'm showing you the framework, but later on I will insert in the specific task, some examples to show you like how it would look like on your calendar with your task, right? But I'm just showing the framework here to go around on how to plan your day for the most output in a sense, right? Okay, so once you're done with your growth session, you can plan a maintenance session. And if you want, you can also plan in a second growth session as well, okay? And this session can be, if you can do 3 hours of work, again, this depends on how long you want to work, how short you want to work and stuff like that. But you can plan another growth session, and this one, you can maybe, instead of buffering for 3 hours, you can keep it at 2 hours. You can keep it at 3 hours. That's up to you, but you can plan in a growth session, or you can just simply go into maintenance as well, right? But the main key thing here is the moment you wake up, you want to not do maintenance stuff. You want to do growth-oriented tasks, right? After that, you want to have another growth session of 2 hours. You want to have another maintenance session. You want to have a maintenance session. After that, that is fine, right? But that should be during the timings where you are not the most optimal in a sense, okay? And then in between these timings, right, there will be timings where you need to take breaks, where you are, for me, I go and work out. So my recommendation is you can color tag these group of tasks. So for me, when I'm working out, I tag all of them as red color, right? So for example, if I'm going to the gym, my gym usually lasts 1.5 hours, okay? And then also any task that is not work oriented, I tag them as another color, right? So this could be like having dinner with friends, for example. Okay, so within my calendar, there are only 3 colors. One, if I'm working. Second, if I'm going to work out, like exercise, that will be red colors. And then the rest of the stuff will be this color, right? So I don't have a lot of different colors because I find that that's very confusing in a sense. And like, I want everything to be very minimal, really clear, and that's why I only stick to 3 colors. Okay, so again, the color coding can be up to you guys. You can choose what kind of colors you want, but when you look at your schedule, you know this color means that, you know, when you look back on your schedule, you can know, like, out of your days, which days you have went to the gym, which days you spend a lot of time working on your business, on your craft, and stuff like that, right? But I only limit myself to 3 colors. So when I do this, let's say, for example, if I wake up at 6, usually I take like half an hour to prepare, and I start my work at 6:30 to 9:30 a.m. And then from 6:30 to 9:30 a.m., once the first session of deep work is done, I usually take a break. Usually that break is half an hour. And then I go into the second round, right? So that could be a growth session. Usually I go to the gym after 2 sessions is done, okay? So for example, this could be, I could take 15 minutes to prepare myself, and then I head to the gym, and then I'm in the gym for 1.5 hours. And once I'm back, then sometimes I have, let's say usually I have my dinner, I have my meals quite late in the day. So when I'm back from the gym, I take probably 15 minutes to prepare, and then I go into my maintenance, right? Where I'm doing everything maintenance. And then finally I have my dinner. Usually I break my fast, I have my first meal. It really depends, but most of the time it's after 4 p.m., right? Sometimes I do it at 2 p.m., sometimes it's even earlier, but most of the days I am having my meals after 4 p.m., right? And then this is the timings that I do. And then sometimes what I do is I learn something, or like this will be free and easy, or, you know, it's really depending on up to you. You can watch Netflix, or you can, you know, have another maintenance session here, but it's entirely up to you. So this is how a typical day of work is like for me, right? First things first, you need to know when you're going to be waking up on a consistent basis. So if I wake up at 6, I take half an hour, 6:30 to 9:30, I'm going into deep work, right? And again, like I mentioned, if there are breaks I'm going to take in between, I'm going to be taking breaks. After the first session is done, I take a short break of around half an hour, and then I go and do my second session, right? So this really depends. Most of the days it will look like that, most of the days. But some days, maintenance work is more important, right? Then what I will do is, instead of this growth, this will be maintenance, right? Depending on what is most important on the day itself, right? So for example, some days are growth, and then the next session I need to go into maintenance straight away because there's a new project that I took, or there's a migration project happening that I need to solve immediately for the partners that I'm working with and stuff like that, right? This is an example of how flexible the schedule is. And then once this session is done, then I go in and do a gym session, and then I do a maintenance session and stuff like that. So in terms of some of the tasks that I do, right? So I'm going to show you some of the tasks that I do. So usually I categorize this either grow. So I don't usually put grow, but you need to know in your mind that this belongs to a growth oriented task. So for me, I key in create because it's still part of growth because I'm creating something. And sometimes it could be like, you know, YouTube video, for example, okay? And this is my current stage now, right? But when I first started, it was not like that. When I first started, the most important thing for me was to do cold emails, right? Because this was the most important task when I first started, because I needed to get clients, I needed to get partners to work with, and this was the most important thing. Like I mentioned, the most important thing for me, for other people, may not be for you. You know what's the most important thing when you are working, and I go into the details of finding out what's the most important thing in the 5 SPS system. Again, the link is down in the description below. If you want to, you can check that out. But I show you how to find the most important thing that you should be doing first, right? But the most important thing is very different from everybody, depending on what stage you're in, what service you're offering, what market you're in, and what are you essentially doing, right? So now I'm just going to do the schedule that I'm doing now, right? So which is create, so YouTube video, okay? So I'm creating YouTube video in the first like 3 hours. And then the next thing, it could be something, it could be create again, and then like another YouTube video, or it could be like 5 SPS, like my 5 SPS course, for example, course outline, right? When spending 2 hours. Okay. Then after that, I go to the gym, and usually gym, I split it out into like, I'm going into very specific details with you guys because I want to make sure that it's as detailed as much as possible, right? So gym, usually I have like, I either do arms, chest, or legs day, right? And sometimes I box as well. So depending, so let's say, for example, this is chest day. Okay, and then maintenance. This is, for me, maintenance is working on my client's project, clients or partners project. Okay, and then 2 to 4 hours, and then I have dinner. Okay, if I have dinners with friends, again, this is very, very flexible. I can be having dinner alone. I can be having dinner with friends, with family, but this is what I will do. I'll schedule in, like, for example, something like that. And then over here, this depends on what the priority is, right? If I want to stop work, I can essentially stop work. But if there's still a little bit of task for me to do, I'm going to include in here, right? So maintenance, let's say client project, right? Or let's say client communication, right? Depending on what is considered maintenance to you. To me, client communication is part of maintenance because I'm not growing the business by talking to the clients, right? It belongs to the maintenance mode thing. I'm trying to maintain the relationship between me and my partners that I'm working with, right? But it's very, very flexible and usually it's not that long. Yeah. It's probably like, let's say, 1 hour, right? So you can see how you can plan out your day, right? So when you're working, you have to make sure that the priority that you should be working on, the most amount of hours that you're spending, should be on the creation portion, should be on the growth portion. Whether if it's creating something, building something, where you are growing either the business that you're working on, growing your income and stuff like that, right? But only you will know what is considered a growth category for you, right? And then, the rest of the days it's it's kind of like your maintenance and stuff. And then sometimes, I have my first meal here, and then let me just plan out the entire day, a typical day of what it will look like, right? So I have another meal here, let's say 6 to 7, and then over here I am, sometimes I'm learning about AI related stuff, or I'm trying to venture into an AI business, for example, right? This can be anything, right? And then this can be like 1.5 hours, right? And then for things that I don't schedule here, it's usually my free and easy, where I am watching Netflix, when I'm hanging out, when I'm just doing whatever that I want, right? So this is how I typically schedule out a day. And you can do this either, number one, the day before. So for example, you can do it on Thursday night. Okay, if I'm planning for something on Friday, I will sometimes plan it on Thursday night. And if not, then you want to plan it before you start your day, right? So for example, if I wake up at 6 o'clock, 6:15, I get prepared, and then I spend 15 minutes to plan out what am I going to specifically do. Now, usually what I do, right, on the night before, I already have an idea of what I need to complete the next day. And so I already have like, okay, for growth, I need to do this. For maintenance, I need to do this. Oh, the next day I have to free up more slots for maintenance because there are a lot more projects that there's more urgent that I need to take on, right? But I already have an idea of what I'm about to do the next day. So when I'm doing this planning, right, it becomes very easy for me. It takes me like 10 to 15 minutes, right? So if you are new, you can try to plan out your day before, and then see if that works for you. So this is how I'm doing it now, okay? The next thing that I want to talk about is, what do you do on breaks? Like I mentioned earlier, there's a few rules that I follow. Number one, when you are doing deep work, when you are doing any task that is belonging to growth-oriented tasks, like for example, you're creating something, you're building something, you do not want to take long breaks, right? Ideally, no breaks if you are in a flow, or maximum, I would say like 30 minutes break, right? And best if, let's say, it's a 10 to 15 minutes break. You don't want to take too much. You don't want to take too long of a break, right? And the reason why is because you still want to be in a place where you are able to focus more and give your best when you come back and work on the most important task for you to excel ahead, for you to move ahead, right? Especially during your deep work timings. Like for example, this timings here or this timings here. Okay, so this break is fine because you're already spending 3 hours here already, right? Usually I have my blocks up. For deep works, I like to schedule 3 hours minimum, right? Minimum. Because like I mentioned earlier, I want to spend most of the time working, right? The majority of the hours should be spending on something, either building, creating, or growth-oriented task. Okay? So while you're taking a break, what should you do? Okay? The first thing is, like I mentioned earlier, don't take too long of a break when you are in your deep work session, and try to keep your breaks like maximum 30 minutes. Okay. While you're on your break, the one thing that you do not want to do is you do not want to distract yourself. Okay. Do not distract yourself. Do not look at your Instagram. Do not look at your phones. You want to do something that is boring. And this is the more, when you are in the deep work session, you have to pay special attention to this. Because, like I mentioned, if you want to keep your focus, if there is a time for you to keep your focus, it should be during your most efficient timing, right? Again, for me, it's in the morning. For you, when you schedule out your days, maybe you start work at 6 p.m. I don't know. Maybe you are a night owl, right? You love working into the nights. Like I mentioned, this framework works for any type of person you are, right? But you want to make sure that during your most focused hours, your time slots, you want to be the most focused as much as possible. And so you don't want to look at things that are distracting. You don't want to look at your mobile phones. You don't want to look at, anything that is considered distracting to you. For me, it is my mobile phone, like Instagram, Facebook, social media and stuff like that. You don't want to look at all these, right? Especially during your breaks here, for example, right? This breaks here or this breaks here, okay? Whenever you have a breaks in between, okay? And the reason why, okay, so I'm going to talk about why first and what you can do during breaks, right? The reason why is because if you stimulate your mind to focus on something more exciting that gives you more dopamine hit than whatever that you're working on, your mind will crave that dopamine hit. Your mind will crave that excitement more. And when you take away that excitement and you go back to working on your growth-oriented task, your growth-oriented task becomes the boring stuff. And so you're going to find yourself very difficult for you to stay focused, right? If you're looking at social media, right? Social media as compared to the deep work session that the growth-oriented task that you're working on, the social media is going to be more exciting. Your brain will naturally want the more exciting stuff first, okay? So when you're taking breaks, make sure that whatever things that you're doing is the boring task, so that when you switch back to your growth-oriented task, the growth-oriented task is the most exciting thing out of the comparison, right? So for example, when you're taking breaks, what you can do is, what I like to do is I like to do some kind of like stretching. I like to do posture workout because my posture is not good at all. So I like to do posture workouts. I like to meditate. And some of you guys, you can do house chores as well. You can like wash your dishes, do your laundry, and you basically want to do anything that is non-distracting, right? Sometimes I meditate as well. And because the breaks are typically not that long, like it's 15 minutes, it's 30 minutes, you can go down and take a walk. The main key idea here is during your breaks, you do not want to do anything distracting, because when you come back to the task is the more exciting thing to do, because you were just, washing your dishes for like 30 minutes, which is very boring, right? So that's what you want to do during your breaks. And then when you come back, you'll be able to focus more because your mind thinks that the task that you're working on is more exciting than the previous task that you were doing, right? So this is the rule of how I would take breaks, and I will highly recommend you guys to do that as well. Now, if you move towards the end of the day where you're focusing on tasks that's not that important already, right? Then you can maybe have some leeway of like checking your social medias, have like, get distracted a little bit. If it comes to that, then that's better than when you are getting distracted during the most important hours of your days. You want to protect the most important hours of your day, right? And then like, for example, if let's say I'm doing maintenance work, right? And then for here, let's say I want to take like a 15 minutes break. And for this 15 minutes, I am maybe checking social media. Whether that is recommended, I would still say no, but I would rather you check social media here than here, right? If that makes sense. So yeah, and then obviously like during your longer breaks here, you can check social media for all you want and stuff like that, okay? That's how I plan out my entire day. This is just part of a 5-step system that I have in my new productivity system, where I show you how to create your own system that allows you to have more time, achieve more, and also have fun at the same time, right? So if you're interested, join the waitlist. The link is in the description down below. So let me know what you think. If you are trying any kind of like time blocking, if you are trying any kind of like schedule, and what seems to be the most difficult thing for you to do, let me know in the comment section down below. That's all for this video. So if you like this video, please help me to press the like button and join the Facebook group if you haven't. Feel free to ask any questions that you have. I'll try my best to respond to all of them. And also subscribe if you haven't, because you'll be notified whenever a new video comes up. You'll be the first to be notified. That's all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Until then, stay safe, take care, cheers.